But I don't want to stop. And I'm not just talking about engineers. I'm talking about people at all levels. We want competent people coming into our country. And HB1, I know the program very well. I use the program. Maitre d's, wine, experts, even waiters, high quality waiters. You got to get the best people. Now then you go into people like Larry, and he needs engineers, and Masa needs, and this gentleman needs engineers like nobody's ever needed engineers, right? So we have to have the quality people coming in. Now, by doing that, we're expanding businesses, and that takes care of everybody. So I'm sort of on both sides of the argument, but what I really do feel is that we have to let really competent people, great people, come into our country, and we do that through the H1 program.
Proposed tariffs on Canada and Mexico and never proposed negotiations sooner on USMCA.
No, it's really not unusual. It has nothing to do with that. They've allowed both of them. Canada very much so. They've allowed millions and millions of people to come into our country that shouldn't be here. They could have stopped them, and they didn't. And they've killed 300,000 people last year, in my opinion, have been destroyed by drugs, by fentanyl. The fentanyl coming through Canada is massive. The fentanyl coming through Mexico is massive. And people are getting killed, and families are being destroyed. I mean, the son gets killed, and the family is a basket case for the rest of their lives. I mean, I've seen mothers that thought they'd heal. They never heal. They say it gets worse with time. It gets worse with time. They lose their boy, they lose their baby, they lose their young daughter to fentanyl poisoning. And I had that talk with President Xi the other day, too, of China. I said, we don't want that crap in our country. We need to stop it. I want to stop it. I had a deal with him. He was going to give the maximum penalty, which in China is the death penalty, the drug dealer. And he was also saying he was going to give the maximum penalty to fentanyl dealers if they sent to the United States and would get the death penalty. And of course, Biden didn't take that up. I had that deal all the time. It was all wrapped up and we have it done. And then the election went nicely, didn't go the proper way. I'm trying to be nice about it. It was rigged. And we had an incompetent president elected, and he never followed up on that deal. And he should have followed up. Because if they got the death penalty, they wouldn't be sending fentanyl to Mexico, Canada, and other places. What do you think about that, too? We're talking about a tariff of 10% on China based on the fact that they're sending fentanyl to Mexico and Canada. Probably February 1st is the date, in my opinion. For Mexico and China, we're talking about approximately 25%. Well, I think it's not going to the Middle East, not yet. We have a thing called the hostages are coming back going on right now, and they are coming back. Some of them have been very damaged. You look at the young lady with her hand practically blown off. You know how that happened, right? Did you know that happened? When you find out, you're not going to be too happy because it was terrible. But the hostages are starting to come back. If I weren't here, they wouldn't be back ever. They would have never come back. They would have all died. If this were done a year earlier, if Biden would have done this deal a year and a half, 2 years ago, or frankly, it should have never happened. October 7th should have never happened. Nobody should be dead. But through weakness, they allowed it to happen, and then it was a disaster for them. But you go back just 6 months ago, many of these young people were living. Young people don't die like that. They're just dying. And young people aren't dying at 22 or 23 years old. They don't die. Like we say, 6 months ago, we had 11 more living hostages. Think of that. 6 months ago, the Biden couldn't get it done, and it was only the imposition that I put in as a deadline that got the sun for you. Tell me something. Sunny.
legacy media narrative setting ability, and they're kind of ready for what they Fox, NBC, CNN, who had not seen the previous policies as deterrents or anything like that. So we don't have to get back into that debate necessarily, but
I think,
go ahead.
To your point earlier about whether or not there will be a public outcry, I don't think there's going to be a kind of resistance liberal kind of outcry over the principle of it. But how he rolls it out may have an effect.
I totally agree with that.
If restaurants are shutting down, for instance, like that, as that article in Chicago suggested, there's some nervousness around what's going to happen there. And sorry, Control, to jump around, but if we could do D4 here about the farm workers, that this is relevant to this, whether or not this survey is accurate or not. Directionally, it seems powerfully in one direction, which is 75%. It says 75% of the Illinois farm workers didn't show up yesterday in Bakersfield because of fears of price raids. America's rural and agricultural regions will be the hardest hit from Trump's immigration policies, food prices are going to skyrocket. So that's the kind of claim that you're going to get from critics of this policy, that you actually need these people showing up for work to do the jobs they're doing at work, and if they don't, if food wasn't buying, restaurants aren't open, all the obvious knock-on effects that we have from what they would call a labor shock to the labor supply. All of a sudden, if people aren't showing up because they're nervous, now people aren't going to stay home forever because they can't work. So it really depends on, to me, how this filters down to people and what the actual scale of it is. Is there any nervousness in Republican circles that they might create something that they can't control?
No, and I've never actually, I shouldn't say I've never seen anything like this, but it's they feel like, again, it's a new age, like Trump has been saying, the golden era, golden age line, but that is more than just like this sort of, this attempt at aesthetic optimism. It's actually because they feel like it is totally a new day, meaning they can be aggressive about policies they feel like they have a mandate on and not cower and do sort of Gang of Eight style immigration politics like they were forced to in 2014. So I think they're actually eager for the crackdowns because it will create, and I don't mean this callously, I think this is, there's a substantive conversation about this, but it creates only live moments, right, where people, like that B4 tweet that we had up on the screen about farm workers, I just think they realize that lands differently with the public now. Doesn't mean it's not a substantive debate to be had about that, but I think they're like eager for this fight because they feel like immigration is a winning one, in the same way that Democrats are eager to talk about abortion because they know that Republicans are on their back feet and it's a losing. The more Republicans are talking about abortion, the worse off they are. And I think Republicans say the more Democrats talk about abortion, the more the public is going to agree with Republicans because Democrats haven't moderated enough on it. So I think they're eager for the fight, to be honest. And I, as I was saying earlier, I think that could create a real overreach. I don't know if it will, but I definitely think it could.
You mean immigration or abortion?
Yeah. No, it's immigration. Like it could end up with some like really bad overreaches.
I see what you. Let's talk briefly about Trump announcing that he's in an executive order that he's ending birthright citizenship, which I think as a news broadcaster, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, I should add immediately, you can't actually amend the Constitution with an executive order.
It's just like Joe Biden declaring the Equal Rights Amendment.
Right, yeah.
Like Michael Scott declaring bankruptcy. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So, Biden on his way out the door posted on Twitter that the 25th Amendment was now ratified. And the 25th Amendment is the Equal Rights Amendment, and it needed to get, had to get 3/4 of the states, and Virginia ratified it after Democrats took over the state, and boom, that made 3/4 of the states. But in the law that was passed to create the process to amend the Constitution and add the 25th Amendment, it said you had to do it within a certain number of years. It was very
28th Amendment, right?
There's what I said. Oh, 25th is the one for crazy people like travelers from those countries will be banned, and the assumption, and it seems to be the driving motivation, tell me if you agree, Emily, is that the bureaucrats are basically being instructed to come back with a list of Muslim countries, which they then believe will qualify as some sort of objective enough process that it won't look arbitrary and racist, and will be allowed to pass muster. Is that right, Emily?
I mean, it's a clever workaround as far as they go. That's the difference between Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0 is you have 4 years of, and I say this seriously, Project 2025. I don't think Donald Trump is like, he doesn't have the book in front of him. That's a stand-in sort of for the project.
There are police reported ahead.
And that's what's happening. I mean, it's you know, when you have 4 years to go back and say, we come in with a mandate, here's what we're going to do. It's almost like historically unusual that they said we have this guy in Donald Trump who's actually going to do what in some cases we didn't feel Ronald Reagan did, George W. Bush certainly did it, but even when Donald Trump isn't of the conservative movement, he's someone who can be used to advance the office of the conservative movement because he's that like Nixonian madman. He's against the deep state. He wants to drain the swamp, and he doesn't care about any sort of broken politics in the paradigm, and he can be the vehicle for like radical change. And that's, you know, so far the first couple of days we're seeing all this get tested. Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button. It's
emotionally feels the suffering of the people and the loss that war creates. And he single-handedly has to unite the nation and carry the will of a people and the morale of a people. He has to lift the morale of a people. And that kind of man struggles to make peace because he understands, he wants justice, not peace. And so from a position of strength there, he wants to go further, recapture all of the land that he sees belongs to Ukraine. And that's exactly when you make peace. And so his very strength, the man that stayed in Kiev, that said, fuck you, we're not going to, we're going to win this. That kind of man that lifted a whole nation, that united a whole nation, that man just also struggled to make peace. And so the third time to make peace, after all of that, the Russian military regrouped and has been capturing land gradually. So the third time to make peace is now. The Trump administration, there's a momentum. They want to make peace. He's a great deal maker. He wants to end wars in all parts of the world.
Who's made the deal in Gaza now?
Made the deal in Gaza, and that is a super complicated situation too, because they made a ceasefire deal with the hostages.
Isn't it amazing that the Biden administration had 2 years, couldn't get anything done, and Trump gets it done in a day. He was saying that he was going to be able to do it, and everybody dismissed it.
Yeah, and I think there's a political battle now taking credit for who made the ceasefire, which I think is silly. It's
Of course you're going to have that.
yeah.
Biden is the president. He's still the president for another few days.
The point is, Donald Trump, there's a real will and a momentum to make peace. There's a respect, there's a fear, there's, whatever you think about Donald Trump, he's this person that world leaders respect in full meaning of the word respect. Not like admire, but fear. I think both Zelensky and Putin fear Donald Trump. And that's a great person to then make peace, because he has the lever. All of them believe, Putin and Zelensky, that Trump can do some crazy shit.
And he probably would, but he doesn't want to.
Right,
This
he doesn't
is
want
the
to.
difference.
And,
That's a very unique position that he's in, where they're afraid of him, but yet he wants peace.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so this is the time. And if you don't make peace now, what's going to happen is the funding from the U.S. and support from the U.S. is going to dwindle gradually. And Putin is willing and able to just wait and to let the war continue for months and for years. And meanwhile, people are dying every single day. Thousands of people. And
What's horrible about this war, too, is there's GoPro footage. There's a lot of cell phone footage. There's a lot of GoPro footage. I've watched too much of it, unfortunately. But it's rough, man. It's a horrible war. And it's a war that's so confusing over here, especially to the uninitiated. For the people that are just like kind of reading the newspaper and getting it's like sort of a cursory understanding of what happened. Russia invaded, why? What they did. And then